Okay, we are recording. Thank you all for joining me this evening. This is our third presentation on our exploration of religion and nationalism, and we're going to read through a passage from the writings of Moshe Avigdor Amiel, who has become one of my new favorite early 20th century rabbis. So we've read some of his essays before on Shabbos afternoon over the past few years, and I think some of those writings you've seen his original voice and his unique voice. I found his little official biography, which I'll put in the chat just to kind of get his dates and basic facts about him. He sorry, where they sorry. Why can't I find the? I have not. I have moved everything around. All right. Okay, never mind. Okay, anyway, so here is yeah, you can just see his dates. This is just like the basic. This is his like little Mizrahi biography. He's from Eastern Europe. He was from Lithuania, had a classic Talmudic education in Tels, in Vilna, and he sort of gave this breakthrough speech at the Mizrahi conference in 1920. And they're like, this guy, we got to get him a bigger pulpit. So they brought him to be chief rabbi of Antwerp, where he set up a bunch of schools there. And then in 1936, he made Aliyah and became chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. That was not a simple process. I think he won an election to be the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. The other contesters, finalists for that position were Rav Joseph Soloveitchik and Rav Yitzhak Herzog, who was Yitzhak Herzog at the time was chief rabbi of Ireland, and later on became the chief rabbi of Israel. But he and Rav Soloveitchik, of course, stayed in Boston and never went back to Israel, other than for that 1936 contest. But Rav Amiel won that against those two other incredibly talented, gifted rabbis. But if you read his drashot, and you understand like how electrifying it must have been to be in his audience, to hear him speak. Mastery of text, really creative thinking. I have the 2 volumes of his drashot on the Parsha and on various holidays. These and some additional writings of his are on Sefaria, so you don't even need to own them if you want to sort of read his writings. Some of his stuff is in English. It's not. Hello, what?
I'm getting a very bad echo.
Oh,
I don't know if other people are hearing this.
Can other people hear me fine? Sorry, Adam. Maybe you're too close because you're in the building. I don't know. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, if anyone else has difficulty hearing, just let me know. Stuart can hear. Okay. Great. Okay. Okay, I'll just put the, okay, and here's the, okay, there's the thing. Okay, so any event, so 1936, he comes to Tel Aviv, chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, and the rest of his life was lived in Tel Aviv, and he was like, he remained like part and parcel of the Mizrahi, but he was in many ways a bit of a dissident figure, and he was very anxious of nationalism as a force, and he in some of his drashot around World War I, and he really, you sort of see he was aware of the dangers of nationalism as a force that could be really negative, and that comes out in his writings as well. So rather than just talk more, I think we'll just read together and what one of a speech he gave, a long lecture he gave at the Mizrahi conference in Poland in 1933, I believe. I'll share my screen and we can look through this together. There's some passages I want to look at. Just to remember, like sort of, nationalism, that's a sort of, as we're using it, as he's sort of aware of it, is this idea that really comes to the fore in the 19th century that, nations all come from the same place, they share a homeland, they share a language, and they should all be independent countries or should have more, sort of self-government in some way. And a very powerful idea emerges in Italy and in France and Germany, and again, the mid to late 19th century. After World War I, the idea was this would be a way to create peace in Europe if we'll break apart these empires and create little nation states, and that'll be a way to create peace. And of course, that obviously failed. Those little nation states, were sort of swallowed up by Hitler and Stalin in the 30s and 40s. But the idea was that this was a good, that nation states were a good idea. But even after the war, nation states are now, empires have continued to be broken apart, and most of the globe is covered by nation states. However, those nation states are now part of multinational organizations, the UN, NATO, the EU, and so maybe in some ways that moderates some of the explosive, dangerous tendencies of nationalism. But that's beyond the scope. We're going to look at some Torah sources. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through. We're going to look at this. Here we go. So here's our text. We'll start. So this is so it's called Hayesodot Ideologiyim Shel HaMizrachi. Okay, the ideological foundations of the Mizrachi. The Mizrachi is the religious Zionist political party. It's the religious Zionist branch of the Zionist movement. Okay, Mizrachi stands for Merkaz Ruchani, the spiritual center. This was founded by Rav Reinus in I think 1901, 1902, thereabouts, to kind of form a religious branch of the Zionist movement, to be Herzl's ally within the Zionist movement, and and went on from there. I guess the successor, of this Mizrachi now, I guess, would be the religious Zionist party in the current government, which we'll see if it's has taken different twists from maybe some of its original ideas. This was a speech he gave. This was a very long speech he gave at this World Congress of Mizrachi in Krakow, Tuf Reish Tzadi Bet, which is 1933. Tzadi Gimel, 1933. So it was printed, I guess, so you can see all the different, there's a little table of contents, all the different, things that he had to say. A very witty speech. He opens by saying, we don't really, they move my speech to the night, and we're not really supposed to do judgment at night. I'm here to judge and to criticize, and that's no good. And, and you have to judge people in their presence. And so I'm only going to judge the Mizrachi party, right? Because those are the people who are here, right? Ein danin shelo b'fnei ba'al davar, right? So those are the people who are here, and so I'm not going to talk. So this is paragraph. Lo adon bazel lo et hasmol hakitzoni v'lo tayamina kitzoni v'af lo et hastam tzioni. I'm not going to judge and evaluate the left radicals and the right radicals, nor am I going to judge the generic, normal, middle, Zionists, right? She'em tzeim b'kan oshin tzeim b'tor orchim ve'ein za midat haknas orchim lahashima, right? So I'm not going to judge them because they're not here. This is a Congress. This is a meeting, a gathering of religious Zionists. Anyone else who's here at this Congress, they're guests, and it's not nice to, make accusations against your guests. So we're going to talk about ourselves. We're going to talk about religious Zionism. We're going to talk about other Zionist Orthodox Jews and our problems, okay? And we're going to judge us. If you send me an email this evening or tomorrow, I will send you this document. This is the full document. You can print it, read it, whatever, and read it at your leisure. So what does he have to say? So I want to look at a few passages. So one piece I thought that was sort of interesting here. Here on page 9, he talks about, he's the hastirot ha-misortot shebein ha-misortot, shebein hatzionut liyadu. What is the hidden contradiction between Zionism and Judaism? And so he says, if you, superficial level, you examine the contradiction, the dichotomy, the tension between Zionism and Orthodox Judaism, you won't find anything, okay? Because באמת אפשר לומר את האני מאמין של הרמב"ם עם האני המאמין של הפרוגרמה הבזלית, okay, בנשימה אחת. You can say the 13 principles of faith and Maimonides that are the core foundational beliefs of Orthodox Judaism, and you can recite the Basel platform, which is the basic platform of the Zionist movement that was formulated by Herzl, and you can say them b'neshima achat. There's absolutely no contradiction whatsoever between the Zionist platform and the Ani Ma'amins of Orthodox Judaism. So that's not where there's any contradiction. The contradiction, however, he says, is much, much deeper and much, much foundational, because the Rambam's Ikari and his 13 principles are principles of faith for an individual to say, Anima, I mean, I believe. Okay, it's about what the individual Jew has to believe to be a believing Orthodox Jew in good standing. Whereas actually, the more foundational contradiction is not about the individual; it's about the collective. Okay, and this paragraph here, which I'm pointing to, you can see my arrow. Right, it's Yunutam Machrezet al Midina Ivrit Be'eretz Yisrael shetityaches be'ofen neutrali lehaTorah shelanu. Af al pi shemida kisa tisbod kol yachid sheyirtze lekayem et haTorah zeh gufa hi kefira v'ikari karim shel hayahadut ki ein umotenu uma ela b'torata. So the Zionist proclamation of creating a Hebrew state in Eretz Yisrael that will be entirely neutral when it comes to our Torah, even though on the other hand, it will tolerate any individual who wants to fulfill the mitzvah of the Torah, okay, that nonetheless it's a kfira ikarim. It's a denial of the fundamental of the fundamentals of Judaism, which is ein umatenu uma ela b'torata. There is no Judaism, there's no our ummah, our peoplehood does not exist other than through means of the Torah. And so this, he says, this is the peak of assimilation, that he doesn't understand anything about Jewish tradition, any of the sacred heritage of Judaism, that turns Judaism into, he says he doesn't even translate it, religion, okay, which is like something that takes place in the private sphere that relates to an individual or the family, and to turn Judaism into a religion is to deny like Judaism at a level so much more fundamental than anything that relates to the 13 principles of faith and Maimonides. And so at its core, there's a contradiction to Zionism and Judaism, which is far deeper and far more profound than any of the superficial tensions between, Maimonides' principles of faith and Orthodox Judaism. And he says the job of the Mizrahi is to kind of, he says, let's skip ahead a few pages. Job of the Mizrahi is to, why did I say page 13? Is to like restore the crown to its glory. Okay, that's what he sees the job of this group. Okay, to restore this fuller sense of Judaism, that we are that we are Mamlech, we're a kingdom, a priest, a holy nation, and we are not supposed to be a people like all others, but we're supposed to be a holy people, a special people that are peoplehood, that our collective identity is defined by the Torah. And Zionism, religious Zionism, is a mechanism for the collective to be an expression of that Torah vision. That's the role, right? It's not nothing innovative. It's to restore this grand vision of Judaism as a collective identity rooted in the Torah for the Jewish people as a collective to be some holy people, something that is beyond a religion that an individual could practice. But again, religion is a Protestant idea from the recent European history, and could only anyone who sees Judaism as religion, that's a assimilationist idea. Do I have still out? That's already packed away, right? You see, well, you can read more on this. You can read what's your name, Lior Batnitsky's book, How Judaism Became a Religion, okay, which is about 19th to 20th century German Jewish thinkers who turned Judaism into a religion, okay, and Rav Amiel thought that was a terrible mistake, and the job of the Mizrahi was to fight against that. So what I really want to show with you, read with you, is this section here that begins Hastirot bein halumiyut harigila ubein ha'amunah shalanu. What are the stirot, the contradictions, the conflict between normal nationalism and our faith? Okay, that's the bit where I want to really focus on. That's really going to get to the core of our question. I'm going to just pause screen share so I can look at your faces for a moment. Questions, comments before we dive in? Okay, so if you see questions, just I will note I will pay attention to the chat if you have chat questions, etc. Okay, I'm going to go back to our screen share. Here we go.
I do have one question.
Please, yes.
Did Rav Amiel have any interaction with Rav Kook as contemporaries?
They must have had interactions because he came to no. He came to Tel Aviv in 1936. Rav Kook was already no longer alive, so they must have had to have read his writings, but I don't think he knew him as a person.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Thank you for asking. I'm sure there's somebody who knows about this, but it's just based on that time, I don't think they would have interacted much. Thanks for asking. Okay, let's go back to that sheet. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, here we are. Okay. Al hastirot ha-misotrot be'imkei hanefesh yesh ben tzinut hachilonit ubein atzar. So when these contradictions that are hidden in the depths of the soul, Zionism, secular Zionism, and the Torah, right? So all those other contradictions we already, between secular Zionism and Judaism, we've dealt with in the first 17 pages of this speech. אמונה ישראל שלכאורה שתיתן מקורן ולא במחשבות ומעשים אך בהרגשות וסיכויים לחיים מופשטיים שלכאורה אין מלכות נוגעת בחברתה אף כמלל נימה, הנה באמת גם באלו יש סתירות מסוטרה. Okay, that was a very long sentence, okay, but there are also contradictions, okay, between the basic simple understanding of nationalism and our faith, Emunat Yisrael, the Jewish faith, our understanding, okay, because okay, let's dive in. Halumiyut b'muvneh haragil. Okay, nationalism in its normal movneh, its normal form, its normal form, let's say, construction. Etzel kol ha'amim. Okay, mekora bemet berega she'anuchiyut hagasa shenimtza etzel kol baalei hachim. So where does nationalism come from? This feeling of patriotism, of love of nation. It's an expression of Anuchiyut, like Anochi, right? I am the Lord your God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Anochiyut is like egoism. Anochiyut hagasa, okay, base egoism that exists amongst all living things. Shekol echad doeg rak al davar kiyumo v'necham milchemet hakiyum. What's like the core existence of every living thing is to struggle for existence and for survival, and to fight this fight for survival. Gamay de milchemet Haganah v'gam idei milchemet tigra, whether it's a war of self-defense or a war of aggression, that's what every living thing is just plunged into, this struggle for survival. So every animal struggles for existence. Okay, that's true for it's true for a grasshopper, it's true for a chipmunk, it's true for a lion, it's true for an elephant, and it's true for a human being. We're all plunged, okay, as living things in this struggle for survival, to kill or be killed, okay, we want to self-preserve. That's this animalistic struggle that we're all placed in. The only difference that human beings, we're social animals, okay, that comes from Aristotle, okay, we're social animals, and so instead of struggling for survival as individuals, we struggle for survival as collectives. So this nationalism with the the capital the, okay, mentioned above, okay, it's based is in a totally a materialist worldview. Kol de Avigdor. What does it see? It sees this world of Kol de Avigdor. It's from the Gemara. Okay, that the strong prevail. Whoever is, okay, possession is 9/10 of the law. Kol de Avigdor. The one who has the power, that's the person who has the right, and justice is on his side. And this materialist worldview sees in all of the laws of nature and all the laws of biology, of life, just this iron law, one iron law, shagadol bole etakatan, the great, the bigger swallows up the small. That's what nationalism is based on, okay? Instead of two lions fighting each other, or two goats, batting heads against each other, it's two nations batting heads against each other with this basic rule of survival that called the Avigdor. Okay, it's the law of the iron fist, of the whoever has the bigger swallows the smaller. That is nationalism. Where does it draw its sustenance from? Rosh Rishon, first and foremost, not from the Tselem Elokim, not from the a divine image that's in humanity. Rather, it's from the destructive satanic force that is in human beings. Zot omeret mi'asina shebo. It's the hatred that's inside of us. Shekol mishenenu ben gizo, that we hate somebody who's not of our race, not of our nation. O lechol mishenenu ezracha, or somebody who's not a citizen of your state. L'miut kazot doeget bioter al ha'miyachya shel ha'acherim. Memashehi doeget al ha'miyamut shel atzma. Okay, only concerned about the who shall live of the other, as an expression of who will die from us. It's this zero-sum game, this narrow stinginess. All this destructive forces and aggression, etc., in exist in people is the Devar Hamamid. It's what sustains, and the Vriach HaTichon, I think the Vriach is like a hinge, the hinge that the central hinge of all this animating force. V'im nachutz lahadgish ki kol amunatenu v'ruach toratenu mitnagedet lumiyut mimin zo min hakatzeh el katzeh. So we cannot express enough that all of our faith, okay, amunatenu, and the whole spirit of our Torah is opposed to nationalism of this kind, from as far as can be imagined. V'lo rak zeh, not only this, ela af kol historia shalanu mareh ki am Yisrael lo titkayem klal v'yefshar haya lo kayem al Yisrael ka'elu, that Jewish people cannot survive at all. We have not survived, and we cannot survive at all based on these foundations. The foundations of the strong survive, that we are concerned only for ourselves, that that is the Judaism can't survive. And that's the opposite of Judaism. There was a moment, it was pretty shocking. I think there was an Israeli politician who on Twitter, he said, history proves that only the strong survive. And I was like, wow, that's amazing that he was able to actually summarize the very opposite of the Torah in a tweet, but he did. So anyway, Rabbi Amiel is saying, Judaism is the opposite. Okay, it's the opposite of the survival of the strong. It shows us, and it negates that ideology that of this entirely physical, materialist worldview that sees survival and perpetuating itself in this way. Ki halumiyut harigila now. Okay, this normal nationalism of above. Yisodab avodah zarah. Right, it's based on avodah zarah, because it sees every nation as having its own god, and there are the gods of Egypt, and the gods of Assyria, and the gods of Aram, and the gods of Persia, okay, and the gods of Media. All of these gods, each nation had its own little gods. Where does our national identity come from? It comes from it nourishes itself from one God. Shahu min haolam v'ad min haolam uveito beit tefillah yikrei l'chol hamim. God's house is a house of prayer for all nations. That's Isaiah. V'lemiyut shalanu ba'al lehefech kedei lavi bein l'umiyut le'olam u'letaken olam v'machut. What's the purpose of our nationalism? Is to reach internationalism and to repair the entire world in the kingdom of heaven. So it's the opposite of normal nationalism. Normal nationalism is an expansion of materialist struggle for survival of all animals, but just taken to the collective, and the collective is in a zero-sum struggle with every other nation for survival, and it comes from basically a fundamentally an idolatrous worldview that sees each nation with its own God. Because we understand there's one God who transcends national identities, that God's house is a house of all peoples. Therefore, our national identity is in order to bring about this transcendence of national identities, that the whole world again will be united in God and worship of God. So what is the pillar of pillars and the root of all roots of this Jewish national identity? It's the image of God that's in humanity. And it's this utter spiritual idealism that is over everything. And so in place of this base egoism, this anuchiyut of this coarse materialist anuchiyut, it's an entirely different level of anuchiyut, of egoism, of concern for einus. That's Anochi Shem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. The Sof Devar Kol Nishma And in the end, everything else will be heard, right? What is the end goal? It shall be in the end of days, that all the nations will flock to him. And we're not going to shut down the doors. There's going to be no need for a passport or for visas. Right? In fact, the Torah already long ago has said there's no, it's forbidden to have visas and passports, and the Torah calls for open borders when it says that there shall be one law for the citizen and for the stranger. So that's our anti-nationalist perspective. So in summary, okay, so where does Zionist nationalism draw from? It draws itself from its strength from hatred. Sinat goyim l'Yisrael. It's from anti-Semitism. Okay, that's why Zionists love to point to acts of anti-Semitism as supporting evidence of their cause. Whereas our nationalism comes not from hatred of the goyim hate us, but no, it comes from we love God and we love every human being created in the image of God. That's our Jewish nationalism. And the Mizrahi, our religious Zionist movement, we've also fallen in this. We've also, in our own evaluation, we've made a simple korech, we've made a simple sandwich. We just made a simple sandwich with, we take a nationalism from normal nationalism like the French and the Germans and the Italians, and we've combined it. We made a little sandwich with Judaism. Okay, put a little religion, smeared some religion on this normal nationalism. Before you can add Judaism to nationalism, you have to wipe away and clean and erase. You can't have I am Lord your God until you've also accepted you shall have no other gods before me. Okay, let's pause. I just said a lot. Let's pause and hear reactions. And what do you think? Okay. Yes, no. Very strong words. I don't know. What do you think?
So,
yeah.
So I was just wondering that, look at his bibliography, the last decade of his life from 36 to 46 was quite a turbulent one. So how did he apply these principles to the politics? He had to take philosophical positions.
Yeah, so I don't know per se. I wish I knew. I don't know. And it's actually, as I've read the Drashot, they're not printed. It tells what parsha, it tells you which holiday. It doesn't tell you what year. So you can't. It's very, which is a shame because it would be really interesting to be able to, really put together, what he said and exactly what was happening. It's like really, I'm missing that. I imagine somebody has done. Like the research and and has done that work. I think that would be really valuable, really helpful to sort of have that. But I don't know enough to comment. This we know, this was 1933, so this was not an easy time, right? Not a very hard time, but it's sort of he looked and saw that that nationalism was not the answer. It's the cause of this darkness coming over Europe is caused by not the solution, right? Like it's I guess the counter argument is like, look, this is this dirty world we live in, and we need to play by the same rules to protect ourselves. And he's saying he would maybe say that's a betrayal of and he he wasn't a pacifist as far as I know. I don't think he was. He wasn't a dissident. He was a prophetic voice. He was a critic, a social critic, and a moral critic of dominant trends in Zionist and I guess pre-state, whatever, but Zionist society. He was a social critic, and as you can see that here very clearly. But but he was part of society. He was chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. He participated in, in the community life of the community. He wasn't separate. So I think that's also like sort of just worth remembering, that he was part of a community and that was, and didn't separate himself from that. But I think he was certainly, I think, was really concerned by these dominant trends and saw that they were really betraying something really unique and special about the Jewish national spirit, right? That to turn Judaism into a religion was a betrayal, was the pinnacle of assimilation, but also to turn Judaism into a nation, to say that Jews could have a nation like every other nation was also a form of assimilation. And more of so like the whole idea of the nation in its secular form, he felt was really, it was idolatrous and evil, and no good could come from it. So someone asked, just sent me a note, was he involved in the rabbinate, the rabbinate, as existed? So the answer, yeah, I believe, I mean, his position was a position was in the rabbinate, that was so he did function. I mean, it did, it was before the state, so it was just a different, I don't know enough about what the rabbinate looked like in 1930 and 1940 and 1950. Like, it had stages in its development, which I don't know every twist and turn, but he had a regular job and he functioned as part of that establishment. And he built schools, and and he was an institution builder, and did conventional things of a great rabbinic leader in those really important years of creating the yeshuv. But did he support the family? Well, he died in 1946, so it was really it was not necessarily, so he didn't live to see the state, but he was a card carrying, member of the Mizrahi. I don't think he ever rejected that. He just thought that he just didn't want the Mizrahi to embrace nationalism. He felt that as he saw secular Zionists embracing nationalism, he felt Judaism was not a religion. You couldn't to sort of limit Judaism to like a private religious matter was assimilationist. But the purpose of collective Jewish national identity was to represent something in the world that really transcended national identity, right? There's one God, and we're all humanity supposed to worship one God. So our national identity has to be rooted in love of humanity, not in love of self. Okay, which you see a lot of, a lot of patriotic feelings. It's about, it's just an extension of this of self-love, and a lot of our we from a psychological perspective, so there's our fear of annihilation, which is like these core fears that human beings have. We sort of, as a defense mechanism, we see the state as a way to feel secure, right, in our own fears and anxieties. So these are powerful forces, and he recognized in a very prescient way sort of their risks. How it works in reality, I don't know. I don't know the answer of how it works in reality to have a state that doesn't have borders, right? It doesn't have.
Right. That was my question, both with the state and if Judaism is not a religion, what is it? And if you're not for a state, then what are you for?
Yeah.
I understand why. Yeah. If you're not for a secular state.
What was he for?
And does he ever talk about the Arabs or other non-Jews and how we're supposed to interact?
Yeah. So I have, for you, if I can pull up, another essay he wrote, so another about, some of the conflict, in the 30s, there was some, and the violence that was erupting already in Man-Day Palestine. We can maybe look at some of them. We'll look at that next. I'll just say in terms of religion, right? Religion is a concept, right? I mean, I guess scholars would say religion is a concept that emerges in the modern West in response to the Protestant Reformation. And you have all the wars of, in Europe in the 17th century, about 16th and 17th century. And as the Protestants and Catholics are killing each other and they settle down, they say, no, religion is what you do private, and we're not going to kill each other over that. And, it's sort of, it's nothing to do with, it's distinct from philosophy and science and government and politics and art and music. Okay, it's just, about you and your spirituality and what you do privately in your home or in your church. That's religion. Okay, so that is a modern Western concept that really doesn't exist in other parts of the world. Doesn't exist in Europe until modernity. It's a distinctly Protestant, vision of what religion is as a sphere of human, thought, etc. And that's very different from again, even today, what exists in the Muslim world, or what exists in the East, and certainly in pre-modern Europe as well, where like science, philosophy, government, and what we would call spiritual pursuits were all kind of, intertwined. And like the story of the modern West is those like different things get kind of separated out. So he thought that was assimilation, that Judaism, like we were not, like our, Sadiq says, like our ein umatenu ela yidei Torah, right? Like the Torah creates Jewish identity. It defines Jewish identity. And you can't just say there's some Jewish identity that's distinct from the Torah. That's assimilationist. So what he wanted, I guess, collective Jewish life, where again, culture and arts and everything, all is about this spiritual vision. So Mitch said, yeah, the founders were also. So I guess the other counter argument there was also like sort of liberal nationalism was also a force. I think that was also an animating force in 20th century European history. That the idea was that maybe you could have like a family of nations that were each celebrating their own national identity, but were sort of also rooted in peaceful relations with their neighbors, et cetera. You could have, that would be a counter argument. That's an alternative vision. And certainly there was a sort of utopian, secular Zionism too had a utopian messianic, vision as well of as Mitch wrote in the chat, of trying to do good for the world, not necessarily, but yeah, you're absolutely, that's definitely true. Let's see if I can quickly find some of his writing. If I can quickly pull it up. I hadn't thought to share it with you, but since you asked the question, let me see if I can find this like very quickly. Let's see if I can find it. A friend of mine sent me this this other essay by Rabbi Amiel, and if I can find it easily, look at it. I can't find it easily. Is this it right here? Hold on. No, sorry, I don't have it here. One place I'm going to look. And if I find it, we can look at it together. So I'll say this. I'll say here's what he had to say. I'll summarize it because I read it and it made a big impression on me. This is it was a debate. Lots of internal debate in the 1929. You have the massacres of Hebron. You have a big. You also have in the context of a much broader.
Recording in progress.
1929, you have the massacre in Hebron. You have riots. You have oops, I'm going to mute you. And real violence breaks out. It's clear at this point that there is going to be a war, that there is not going to be a Jewish state without a war, and that's sort of when the Zionist movement realized whatever utopian, and naive hopes they had were they realized that that the war was coming, and that was some point in the 20s. By 29, if not earlier, that was clear. There was another round of violence in 1936. I guess that's probably in the context where there are like internal debates about what tactics Jews should take up and not. And there's a there were Arab terrorists, there were Jewish terrorists, and there was a lot of hand-wringing amongst Jews and rabbis about the Jewish terrorists, and Jews are really innovative in there, and like Jews were putting bombs on buses and markets, like not military targets, like civilian targets, like buses and marketplaces were targeted by bombs. That's like Menachem Begin did that. That was our guys were doing that, and that sparked a debate in amongst public intellectuals and religious leaders among the Jewish community. So he wrote an essay in which he responds to somebody who had said, it's really bad, it really looks bad for us if we engage in this sort of terrorist violence, and it sort of harms our cause. And he responds and says, no, actually, that kind of discourse of, explaining how pragmatically it really hurts our cause if we, engage in terrorist violence, that's a sort of a morally vapid way to think about things. And Lo tirtzah, the Torah says thou shalt not murder, and that's actually a core, like, inviolable law, and that should be how we talk about such things. We shouldn't be engaging in pragmatic conversations about what is and what isn't going to help our cause. We should be just reminding ourselves of this like basic moral, religious, legal principle that murder is always categorically evil and forbidden. And he also says we should also just feel more like mourn, like our own losses, and not be stoic, right? Like I think he was sort of rejecting this argument that we have to stoically accept the losses, the Jewish victims of this violence, because to respond in kind would be really pragmatically problematic. And he says, no, we shouldn't be stoic. We should mourn and cry and really passionately feel the loss of our brothers and sisters to this violence. And we also can't respond in kind because the Torah prohibits murder. And that's like a fundamental law that can never be totally unequivocal, lo tirtzach. And so we can't respond in kind for that reason. So that's, I don't know. So he was not he was aware, like in his lifetime, in a time when he was exercising leadership, there was conflict, and it was clear to most that war was eventually going to come. So I think to be a Zionist of any kind in the 20s and 30s meant you knew that war was coming, and that the Zionist aspirations would only be achieved through warfare. I think that was sort of known by everyone. And I think he was, I don't know if he was okay with that or not, but he was aware of that. So, as opposed to others, right, who at that time really turned against mainstream, like Martin Buber, who was like, okay, like we can't achieve our aims through warfare, like Martin Buber and that circle, around him, or of Aaron Shmuel Tamaris, who never came, who was in Europe and became a pacifist in the aftermath of World War I, and a really anti-Zionist. I have his book here, right? World War I made Rav Tamaris into an anti-Zionist pacifist. He had been a Zionist, and World War I sort of disabused him of that any good could come from nationalism and any use of violence. But Rav Amiel was much more moderate in that regard. He remained part of the Mizrahi, again, served as chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, but as this internal critic. Other questions or comments? Should we squeeze a few more paragraphs in? All right, let's do that. Okay. And again, send me an email tonight. I'm happy to send you the full thing. All right, let's go back to. Here we go. Okay. Oh, it's actually almost done with the side. Okay, here we go. Halumiyut chadasha. This new nationalism. Im ki einena bichlal okim achirim al kol panim hi bichlal azhara shel hishemer lecha pentinakesh achreiha v'penti drosh le'elokeihem lemor echa yavdu hagoyim ha'ela et elokechem v'seh ken gam ani lo tasun ken l'shem elokecha. This is from Dvarim. Okay, so it might not be true that nationalism is literally idolatry, but it still falls, this new nationalism amongst the Jewish people, but it still falls into this assimilationist trend. The Torah warns us, like, keep yourselves, guard yourselves, lest you, go follow after them, meaning the Canaanite nations, okay, lest you seek out their gods and say, how did these nations serve their gods? And I will do as just like they do. Thou shalt not do this to the Lord your God. Lo tavod rak mitzad hachikui shel avodat hagoyim le'elokeihem, which means, this is true, this is Masechet Avodah Zarah, okay? You're not allowed to worship Hashem using the methods by which the nations worship their God. Okay, that's true. K'muvan shegam avodat ha'lumiyut shelanu im hi ba'a rak mitzad hachikui shel echa yavdu hagoyim ha'ela gam al zen mahalav shel. Very nice. It's a nice little drasha. Right? You can see why he was a very successful rabbi. Okay, right? So that's also true. If our nationalism also comes only from this chikui, from this imitation of how do the Gentiles worship, right, their national identity, okay, then it too falls under this prohibition of hishemer lecha, of keep yourself. Okay, so that's that's what concludes this section on nationalism. Okay, so it's maybe it's sort of slightly more moderate. Maybe it's not full-fledged idolatry, but it is it's at least this assimilationist goal, or comes from this assimilationist urge of trying to do what they do. They have flags and national anthems and armies, and that's how those types of social animals express their anochiyut, their love of self, in this collective way by loving their nation. And so Jews do the same thing. That is really problematic. That's really, really problematic. That's really problematic. So that's the end of the section. The other section goes off into other directions, I think. So it's really, maybe we'll take us afield. So what do I want to say? I'll say as follows. I'll say this. Rav Kook, someone asked about Rav Kook. Rav Kook has this passage, a very, very famous passage, where he says, we went into exile under duress, but with a certain happiness, a certain resolve, inner resolve, because we knew that it was not appropriate for this holy people of Israel to exercise sovereignty during the Dark Ages. And now, Rav Kook wrote in, the 1920s, as the Dark Ages are ending, and it's no longer necessary for, nations to engage in warfare and, international intrigue in order to preserve their national identity. Only now are we returning to our land and, picking up the reins of sovereignty. I think it's a really, really telling passage because it links Rav Kook's support for Zionism with his messianism, right? He really saw Zionism as part of this messianic process by which, there was the old, traditional Jew had lacked vitality and energy and creativity, and the new secular Jew lacked this connection to the holy and to the old, and there was going to be this religious Zionist synthesis in which the old was renewed and the new was sanctified, and this was happening in Eretz Yisrael as we return there, as humanity is entering this period of enlightenment, and we've formed a League of Nations, and we're abandoning warfare, and everything is becoming better. And his messianic Zionism, he was Zionist because he was a Messianist. He supported the Zionist, as part and parcel of his messianic expectations for the future. And I think I think we have to come up with a very different sense of right. Rav Kook died before the Second World War. He died before the Holocaust. I don't know how he would have kind of made sense of the state of Israel that came into existence in a as yet unredeemed world, that the state of Israel has had to engage in warfare and all the things that he really wrote against in order to come into existence and to sustain itself. So I think these are questions we have to really deal with. I'd say, personally, I think there's no way you can't undo. I'd say that. Okay, I'd say the belief that independent nation states are a way to bring peace, I think that was disproven, 100 years ago. I think international cooperation and multinational organizations have a better track record of preserving peace. And so I sort of support those. Again, the UN, NATO, whatever, the EU, those types of international organizations, forms of cooperation, interconnectedness seem to have a better track record of preventing warfare than independent nation states do. And I think the way future for the Jewish people, I think, is to, we can't undo the past, but I think we can look forward towards something better than just imitating, what others are doing. So I think we have to, obviously, the world is an ugly place. So we have to protect ourselves. That's true wherever we live. That's like a prime responsibility, right? That we, to sustain our existence. But I'm troubled by people who see that survival as the end, as an end in itself, and not, and in so doing, have forgotten that the goal is really something much beyond, much greater than that. And I don't know how or when or in what capacity there's going to be peace in the Middle East, but I do believe that when it comes, it will not just, because the whole world is focused on it, because of what it's going to transform there won't be peace in the Middle East without the whole world being transformed. That seems obvious to me. So as that realization, so how we get there, is beyond my abilities, but I think it will transform the world when it does occur, and I think that is what our Jewish peoplehood ultimately is about, right? It's survival, not for survival's sake, but survival for something greater. So yes, we have to survive, and that's important, but I think we can't be satisfied with survival. We have to try to strive for something better. So that's a little editorial comments of my own at the end, but I found his words really powerful, and I think it's worth keeping in mind as we, not to be captivated, right, by, I forget who it was who says, somebody, not to be captivated by the trappings of like petty materialist nationalism, and the flags and the anthem and the marching soldiers and all of that. Like that's I think our national identity has to be at something much greater than that. Okay, questions or comments on anything we've seen or talked about? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm gonna stop the recording.